それでは皆様、次のセッションご紹介させていただきます。次のセッションは、銀行業界における Web3 活用。Web3 in banking is our next session. And I'll now introduce our members. First of all, panelist will be Ronit Ghose from Citi Global Head and the Future of Finance. Diana Biggs, the IKX partner. Yusuke Takezawa, Program Chief Strategy Officer. And our moderator is Mark Makdad from Moneytree, Kabushiki Aisha, Founder, Chief of Customer Operations. And now, please come to the stage.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Mark Makdad, and I will be your moderator for the session today about Web3 in banking. I don't know how many other sessions you've seen today, although when I met my panelists earlier, I realized we're definitely the banking crowd. We have collared shirts and shoes on. I don't know how much we fit in a Web3 sort of context. I've seen a lot of T-shirts today, but we're going to figure that out. Just to briefly introduce myself, Mark Makdad, I'm one of the founders of Moneytree. I've been in Japan for about 20 years, last 13 of which doing Moneytree. I'm very familiar with retail banking in Japan and in Asia. My specialties are in open banking and APIs. Today I'm really looking forward to learning a lot from the panelists about how Web3 technologies can be applied in banking and what the challenges are. So lest I speak too much, I'd immediately like to kick off by asking Diana about this. Diana, I believe you have a long career in history in both banking and on the startup side of the industry. And I'd like if you could give us an overview of what you see the challenges are to Web3 technology adoption.
Yeah, so hi, everyone. Great to be here. I'm Diana Biggs, one of the partners at 1KX. We are a crypto-native venture firm. Investing across the ecosystem, so infrastructure, middleware, and consumer. As Mark mentioned, prior to joining 1KX, I spent several years working as a management consultant to banks with Oliver Wyman Financial Services, moving into crypto about 10 years ago, but then also served as the global head of innovation for HSBC's private bank from 2017 to 2020. So, yeah, that's no small question in terms of what the challenges are for adoption. First of all, if we look at where we are as an industry in terms of like the nascency of the technology itself, we are still in the very, very early stages of the readiness for this adoption to be the technology to be adopted at a mass scale. For the change in the adoption within financial services institutions itself, I would say that there is actually a lot to be optimistic about in terms of just how challenging it can be to have any kind of digital transformation and technology transformation within a large organization. So within banking today, essentially all that we're doing, we're having to build on top of legacy infrastructure that's been around for about 30 years now. Probably not that many people have heard of COBOL, let alone know how to program that anymore. But that's sort of one of the realities that you're dealing with when you're looking to transform. So you have a huge amount of legacy infrastructure. And so a lot of the FinTech improvements and opportunities have been sort of more on the UX side or dealing with sort of fraud prevention and management and really like at the surface layer because of the legacy infrastructure that you're dealing with. And why blockchain technology has been such like a radical potential shift for the industry is that it's actually enabling us to completely transform and start from the bottom to potentially replace all of that infrastructure with a new version. And that's obviously something that's going to take a long time, and we see that playing out as such. But yeah, many roadblocks along the way.
Okay, thank you very much, Nana. I mean, we're talking about an entire potentially technology replacement. That's going to take a long time, and there's going to be blockers inside a bank, regulatory, and many things. I'd like to go to Yusuke next, because Yusuke's company, Progmat, as I understand, is working with Japanese financial institutions as well as some overseas to add your company's technology layer to the bank. So maybe you could tell us about what's going well, what the struggles are, and what you think about the adoption as well as some of the issues that Diana raised.
Okay, thank you. So before talking, I would say, the situation in Japan, I'd like to briefly explain myself. My name is Yusuke. I'm a Chief Strategy Officer at Progmat. I'm leading the business creation, especially in stablecoin areas. And in 5 years ago, Japan is one of the center of the Web3 related business. And at the same time, we had a lot of trouble at that time. And we understand that how fast this industry will develop compared to the other industry we face ever. So in Japan, the regulatory authorities try to create the legal framework first. So we created the legal framework for security token in 2017 and created the framework for stablecoin last year. So currently, private sector has to accelerate their business in Japan market. But the situation in other countries are totally different, right? Many companies are trying to create the legal framework by themselves. So if we talk about Japan market, we have to think about how to create the business model itself. That's a normal consideration, how to make the profit from stablecoin business or security token business, something like that. But when we consider to the expansion of our service to other markets in the world, we have to talk to the regulatory authorities as well. And as you guys mentioned, it takes a long time. So we have to pick up some market that has a strong needs for stablecoin utilization, especially for the B2B transaction. So we have started the discussion with authorities in many countries, authorities from this year. And that's one of our strategies to accelerate the mass adoption of our Web3 services.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to go back, I'd like to stay on this topic of stablecoins and adoption inside banks. Ronit, I understand your knowledge is not Japan market, but many markets. And maybe you could comment on what you've heard so far and from the bank perspective.
Sure, and thank you for having me at this event. Excited to be back in Tokyo. I first visited the city. I was telling someone yesterday in 1995, and she looked at me and said, I wasn't born in 1995, and that made me feel sufficiently old. So there we are. I work for a bank, so we're old, right? Now, it's kind of interesting. Banks are, in many ways, this mix of a profit motive and a discovery and an adventure and safety, control, regulation. And those two motives or principles are intention. So oftentimes people ask me, I'm not the only person who's worked in a bank on this stage, but oftentimes I'm asked, hey, what does a bank think? A bank doesn't think anything. There are lots of people in banks who have lots of different views, and those views are usually in conflict and tension. So that's the first thing. If you're not in a bank, you've got to remember that when you're dealing with a bank, there's no one view that a bank has or a bank across the world. Like, you go to different countries, the regulations are different. So that's the first thing. Another kind of principle I always like thinking of, so I don't know if you can tell from my voice, but I grew up mainly in London, in England. So I speak, for good and bad, English. But I wasn't born speaking English. I was born in a town called Calcutta, a huge metropolis in West Bengal in India. There's about 20 million people, not quite as big as Tokyo, but there's 20 million people. And I wasn't born speaking English. I happened to adopt this language, which was very valuable as I went around the world because it's the kind of lingua franca of the world. But it meant that I kind of lost, as I tried to assimilate in England, I lost my native languages. And the reason I'm mentioning this language point is that you made maybe a throwaway comment about technology replacing. This is not about replacement. If we think about technology replacing, we're never going to ever change. This is about having parallel, at least for a while, maybe parallel rails. I've been visiting, obviously the infrastructure in this country is amazing. So I'm here with my youngest boy who's a train freak. So we've been to, on all the railways, we've done the Shinkansen, we've done the Nozomi 700, zooming along at speeds that we don't get in England. And just like when we built the railways in England in the 1830s, and then it spread around the world in Belgium, in France, in Argentina, in Japan, these railroads got built next to roads. Those roads were built for horses and carriages. Now, over time, those roads became much better. Those roads became suitable for fast cars. And I think of the banking technology stack in the same way. So a lot of our stacks, so the reference to COBOL, is roads that were built for horses and carriages. But they will become highways and autobahns and motorways. And it's already happening. So today, with old-fashioned technology and swift messaging, I can send messages almost real time, not quite real time, but almost real time. If you're doing major hub to hub, that wasn't possible 5-10 years ago. Still, sometimes now these messages will disappear. And obviously at weekends, they don't go. Because bank holidays, weekends, they don't go. You can't track them. And this is where stable coins come in, or other forms of blockchain-based movements of money, because that's 24/7, it's on all the time. And we, like many banks, are experimenting with stable coins and having 24/7 payments, initially in dollar-linked stable coins, but over time, these are permissioned blockchains initially because they're regulated, but it'll change. So the key point I want to leave with is two. One is, there's no such thing as a bank. Within a bank, there's this fundamental tension between the profit motive, the discovery, the adventure motive, and then the safety control. And the other one is, think about it as roads or languages. I've become monolingual. And in a way, that kind of almost is a very good symbolic representation of being a banker. Why do we need to... If you go and live in most countries, in most hubs, if I was back in Calcutta, in school, I spoke in 3 languages. The language of my state, which was the language of my family, the language of my teachers, the language of instruction, which was English, and the language of Northern India, Hindi. English, Hindi, Bengali. Most kids are naturally trilingual in big cities in India. And so that's the kind of model I think about. It's like technology. It's not about English replacing. We can have another rail, and then over time, we'll have to just find ways of connecting these languages of railways. I don't know if that was the answer you expected, but that's my thoughts.
I don't
know what you're going to do with that, but good luck.
It gave me a lot to go on, but I want to ask Diane, did you have something you wanted to say to that, since there are references to technology and COBOL and replacing? If not, I can continue. But
No, I think that's extremely spot on and a really helpful way to look at it, because essentially we are building systems in parallel, and there will be multiple different systems which exist. And that actually also speaks to the nature of this technology, in that we're building predominantly, and what we're investing in are actually open source protocols that can be interoperable, and this is one of the key areas that's being worked on today, that allow for composability, and this is one of the main benefits, is that you're able to take elements from different systems and essentially create them and layer them in ways that will work best for your use cases, for your institutions. And that's something extremely novel in and of itself, in that we're moving away from this model of centralized, siloed systems that can hardly connect to each other for a very simple piece of identity data, or payments data. This is something that we've been trying to work on. I know that this is an area that you're working on with open banking. It's something that my teams did at HSBC. And this was really just for one regulated institution to allow another to see past payments that have passed through, in order to know, can I verify based on past transactions that this particular user is eligible for such and such an offer. And that's only still happening today. And so the leapfrogging of these types of use cases and that sharing of information, also enabling individuals to take hold of their own information, and the realm of innovation possibilities when you have that composability, when you have these systems that are inherently open and able to interact cross-paths, countries and cities speaking with each other in a multitude of languages versus replacing.
I'd like to go to Yusuke. Yusuke, thank you, Diana, by the way, I'm sorry. Yusuke, you said something earlier when we were, before we got on the stage, about working with countries that haven't developed certain kinds of technology or infrastructure, for example, to the level that Japan has. When you've got these horse and carriage roads, who needs to invest in all these concrete roads? That's going to, as Diana said, it's going to take 10 years, it's going to take 20 years. They'll get there, but it's going to take time. On the FinTech side of it, I don't even know if I'm allowed to still use that word, by the way. I still use it. I'm a FinTech company. But on the startup side of things, let's go with that. On the innovation, on the startup, on the new technology side of things, you still have to make a product and sell it and get it in the market. So could you tell us a little bit more about how your firm is approaching financial institutions, both in and out of Japan, to get your new technology deployed?
Okay. So as Mark said, our company is trying to develop the new stablecoin-based settlement system. But one of the features is we are trying to create the system as an external system. That means each bank don't have to do the in-house development by themselves. This is very important because top-tier banks can do by themselves because they have a big business and they have a big profit from their existing business. But when we think about the banks in the developing countries, they don't have the enough financial fundamentals. So if we try to cover that kind of market, we have to think how to minimize the investment of each bank. So that's why we created our own system, and we're trying to provide it to each bank. So each bank can access to our system by API connection. So they don't have to make huge investment, and also they can introduce that function in very short time. That's the strategy we are trying to approach. And in the market, most of you guys know that many big banks are trying to create tokenized deposit ecosystem, right? And our stablecoin has a the similar function with tokenized deposit. This is because in Japan we have the regulatory framework for stablecoins. So our stablecoin is a new type of stablecoin, and it is risk-free and fully compliant with the regulation in Japan. That's why it can be used in the B2B transaction. And in addition to that, we can talk to the regulatory or governmental sector in other countries as well, because we have the regulation in Japan. So that's the basic situation we have now, and some have the business strategy we are approaching at this moment.
So it sounds like Japan's relatively developed regulatory framework is actually helping you export your product. Is that right?
Yes, sure. Because if we think about P2P transaction between individuals, you can get stable coins from the exchange market and you can send it to anyone you want to. But when in the B2B transaction, the transferring amount will be much bigger than the B2B transaction. And also, we have to comply with the requests from the regulatory authorities like ML safety or KYC process. So that's why without the clear regulation, it's not so easy to move forward the project discussion with other entities other than Japan market.
I see. So do you see that, and I'm sorry for continually asking you questions, but so you think there is some opportunity, though, for Japan to show leadership in the regulatory space and then other countries to follow. The reason I'm so interested in this area, Japan Open Banking was very similar. Japan Open Banking was the first in Asia that I understand. And other countries were looking at Japan. Oh, what did they do? What did they do? And it helps bring those innovation changes to the market, which when you're involved in cross-border is very, very important. So, but it is also, regulatory can also be a big challenge as well. That's something we spoke about beforehand. So I'd like to ask Diana a little bit about, in maybe when you were working at the bank, how did you see regulation and also what Ronit referred to as the safety function inside the bank slowing down the adoption of technology, specifically Web3 technologies?
So I can't speak to Web3 specifically from my experience in the bank, but certainly, I mean, banks are highly regulated organizations, especially if you're working for a very large bank. That's going to be a really critical element of any type of new initiative that you're doing within the bank. And so within innovation teams, I mean, for us actually with my own innovation team, we often partnered with the regulator to use this. In the UK, they have the FCA sandbox for innovation. So we did a number of pilots there. And essentially you are doing it in a safe space where you can trial certain new types and test with real customers to enable those innovations. So it really has to go hand in hand throughout the entire design process when you're looking at any new offering. And an important part of that is ensuring that the individuals from legal, regulatory, compliance form part of your pilots and initiatives. So for any kind of fintechs that want to work with banks or anyone working inside a bank, I would say it's really critical to form those partnerships early and to bring them through the experience and to help them to understand and also feel ownership in terms of what you're building together so that you can find these solutions in partnership for what works. Now, of course, for the Web3 space, that's something that is still evolving in many markets, and so it can present a challenge there. And I'm sure Ronit can speak to that as well.
I was about to ask Ronit about, a large global financial firm looking at implementing a new technology, a new road that crosses multiple regulatory jurisdictions. What do you do? That must be incredibly complicated.
Yes.
Sorry for the easy, difficult question.
Do you want me to say more? I think the answer is yes, it's very complicated. Actually, if I could just pick up on some of the points mentioned both by Diana and by Yusuke. Regulation is really, really important, as you're saying, Mark. We are ultimately, if you're touching money, if you sort of take a step back and think about how blockchain and Web3 is different to, say, other technologies that we've been working with in the last 20, 30 years, this, call it group of technologies, culture, business model touches upon usually money. And in nearly every country I know about, there are regulators and politicians who consider it their job. And that's how it's different to other technology innovations. And this is where you get a lot of problems and challenges with startups and entrepreneurs. So this is a kind of huge vector or a huge factor. Now, sort of stripping that down, how, in a way, innovation has changed in the last 20, 30 years is, and this is what I find so exciting about Web3, or blockchain as a technology, if I call it blockchain rather than Web3, is it's truly global. You don't have to sit in, now there's an amazing amount of talent in the Bay Area, in the US. I'm not like shitting on America here, so don't misinterpret me, okay? There's an amazing amount of talent in the US or in traditional centers. But what's amazing about blockchain and Web3 is that it's in many ways truly a global industry. So there's this tension between regulation that typically happens in national boundaries and the talent and the ideas that are popping up all over the place. And a lot of the innovation that's happened, not just in Web3, but you could say even in Web2, the whole kind of mobile internet revolution, it didn't come out of the US. It didn't come out of the UK, or the traditional kind of homes of like the economic and technological motors in the 19th and 20th century. In the 21st century, it's come out of places like the biggest and best example of financial inclusion that I know of using technology is M-Pesa in Kenya. Nearly everyone in Kenya has an M-Pesa account. It came out of a telco in Kenya. True, there was a UK connection, but Vodafone in Safaricom, but it came out of Kenya. The biggest mass market public digital infrastructure that I know of in the last 10 years from a government came out of India, UPI. And the same with Web3. There are so many interesting developments happening all over the world. So yeah, I'm hoping all the big banks, including my own, play a role in this. We will play a role in it, particularly when it comes to initially payments. So using blockchain technology as a supplementary rail for payments, and also in capital markets, providing investor clients with access to, you could call them Web3 or crypto native products. And that's already beginning to pick up because the regulators are giving us permissions. But typically, the US regulator is circumspect. I think Japan, Singapore, Switzerland might be ahead. I'm based in Dubai since 2016, and the UAE regulators in Abu Dhabi and Dubai are definitely very open to experimenting with new technologies. It's kind of interesting. Singapore, Switzerland, UAE, these are relatively small countries with big ambitions and big visions. A bit like a scale-up or a startup, these countries are. So I don't know, Japan might fit into that. I don't know. I mean, you're obviously a very old country and a very big country, but the ones that are ahead seem to be these kind of startups that want to be scale-ups, and they're trying to make a mark on the world. And the UAE is very much, particularly Abu Dhabi, trying to model itself on Singapore for the 21st century.
I think we're going to run out of time, so I would like to come back to Yusuke and Diana individually and ask for final comments. But I think what I've heard today, to summarize very briefly, is that Diana and Ronit as well, you're bullish on this, on technology adoption, technology change, but it's going to take time. And Yusuke, you're bullish as well. You're working in a company that's providing a technology to existing players. But the how part, this global network of talent and people, but when we finally get to the layer of banking, there's regulation, there's existing infrastructure, there's a lot of challenges. I guess, what did I miss, or is there anything else you'd like to add? I'd like to ask Diana and Yusuke for about 30, 45 seconds each.
Yeah, well, I think there's a huge amount of opportunity, and I'm excited for when the relationship perhaps becomes less confrontational. And of course, there is still the innovator's dilemma and the opportunity for a lot of layers from banking to be disrupted with essentially a technology that replaces intermediaries. You're replacing sort of this trusted, and question being whether they should be, intermediaries with math and code. And so that opens up opportunities for a massive amount of efficiencies, even for regulatory and compliance, to actually have a lot of the layers and a lot of the challenges they face today intermediated away to be actually coded. And so we're extremely excited about that. It's going to take some time and some understanding and, of course, the sort of commercial tensions, but we'll get there.
Okay, thank you very much. And Yusuke?
Just quick comment from me. So Web3 business is not only for the Web3 company anymore. So commercial banks and the regulatory authorities or every key persons are ready to start this new business. And we're talking to the real, the top tier Japanese companies and involving the necessary financial institutions as well. So it will be materialized very short time, 1 year or 2 years. So I hope we can provide any, the big news in this year or next year.
I'm looking forward to it. All right, I'd like to thank all of my panelists, Ronit, Yusuke, Diana, thank you very much, and thank you everyone for listening. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh, we'd like to take a group photograph now at this time, please. So if you could please go to the center of the stage. これから記念写真を撮っていただきたいと思います。Thank you so much. Please give them a big round of applause. どうぞ皆様もう一度盛大な拍手をお送りください。それでは次のセッションまでしばらくお待ちください。Please wait and we'll now prepare for our next session.